do love the stink of victory.
Time to burn!
To a crucible.
Hey there, fellow exiles. Today I want to talk about my Corrupting Cry champion. So this is an absolute dream of a build. I've been having an absolute blast playing it, and it's essentially an Autobomber. And the way this deals damage is that we use War Cries and we use a Corrupting Cry support gem to inflict corrupted blood debuffs every time we War Cry. And it ends up in this really smooth sort of Autobomber playstyle, as you would have seen in the gameplay at the start of the video. And yeah, it's a very comfortable way of playing the game. Now, before we get into the logistics of the build, real quick, I just want to say I'm sorry I haven't been uploading as of recent. It's because I've just moved for uni, so I'm trying to get settled down. I'm trying to organize my life a little bit. And generally from here on out, I'm gonna have less time for Path of Exile in general. That being said, I will still try to make some wacky, fun, fast-paced, low-button builds and try to upload them so that I can share them with other people in the community, especially. But I'm just letting you guys know that the uploads will be slightly more inconsistent from here on out. As always, remember to like the video if you guys enjoy it, and subscribe because it really helps me out if you enjoy my content. And yeah, so let's get into the build. So, Corrupting Cry is a support gem that was added in 3.22 in Ancestral League. And basically what the support gem does is it applies 4 stacks of Corrupted Blood, similar to Corrupting Fever, a skill gem. Corrupting Cry applies 4 stacks of Corrupted Blood, and each stack of Corrupted Blood deals base physical damage over time. Now, the one thing about this is the method of application is slightly odd in that you have to basically War Cry, and everything affected by your War Cry is gonna get affected by Corrupted Blood, right? So you can see every time I War Cry, basically anything in this area will get hit with the Corrupted Blood debuffs. Now, the normal issue that you really have to solve with this is that the lowest cooldown War Cry is 3 second, has a 3-second cooldown, which is General's Cry. If you look at any other War Cries, they generally have 8-second cooldowns, which is very long. So because the base duration of this is only 2 seconds, that means is you have to do 2 things. You have to scale your duration a little bit, but you also have to scale a ton of cooldown recovery speed, and that's very, very important so that you can actually hit the 10 stacks of corrupted blood. So for this build, we do that through a mass of tattoos, right? We just have, if you actually look at all of my strength nodes, they all just have 8% Warcry cooldown recovery rate all over the tree. And additionally, I also have a shield, a hunter shield with tier 1 increased Warcry cooldown recovery rate. Now, assuming you can't really get this shield suffix here with Warcry CDR, what I would instead recommend is you could grab both of these Warcry CDR nodes that I'm not taking, and you can also replace this regen tattoo with another Warcry CDR tattoo. But that is essentially how the skill functions. It's a support gem. Every time you Warcry, you apply corrupted blood debuffs. These stack up to 10, so ideally you'd want to be able to land 3 Warcries before your duration runs out. And yeah, it's pretty simple, and it's a very, very large AoE, so it's pretty comfortable to play. Now, traditionally, what would have happened is this build would have run Call to Arms on the tree because you want your Warcry to be instant. When you're walking around, you don't want to be stopping every time you Warcry. But because they removed that keystone, we now have to use another support gem to fit in Call to Arms, which is basically a massive damage loss this league compared to past leagues, because you're basically losing a support gem on a skill that almost didn't have any good, like really OP support gems to begin with, and it's not like the skill does a lot of damage, so needing to fit this in was a pretty big problem. However, this league we also got access to a jewel which pretty much makes up for that damage loss, and that jewel is a Perandus Pact. Now, in this particular slot, with this setup that I have here with my Unnatural Instinct, this Perandus Pact is currently granting me about 234% increased physical damage, which on PoB comes out to being about 25% more damage, which is basically almost a support gem. So yes, it does take up a jewel socket, but it does also sort of make up for the loss of Call to Arms in a way. It's not necessarily a direct replacement, but it does help the build feel a little bit better than it should. Additionally, for damage, of course, being a physical damage over time skill that is not an ailment, is very, very hard to scale damage. So outside of the Perandus Pact, I am grabbing pretty much any damage I can anywhere on the tree, which would be like fizz damage here and fizz damage here. And then I also go and grab Spiritual Aid, just so I can also get some minion damage on my weapon so that I can get even more damage, which I would otherwise not have access to. And then we have one large cluster, aside from just a plethora of jewels. One benefit of this build is also that you can get 100% increased armor in most scenarios, as well as just permanent onslaught with a medium cluster, which is very, very nice for how this build feels when you're mapping. You can actually go pretty fast, which helps the build feel pretty zoomy even at like this rate. As you can see, like this ends up being pretty cozy to play. And yeah, basically 0 buttons pressed. Other than that, there's not much damage scaling into this. On the higher end, maybe once you have a Mage Blood or something, you can scale the damage even higher. But there's a few other things that also go into the damage, which I'm not going to talk about, which kind of go against Mage Blood in a way. So the next thing that I'm really doing for damage here is I am basically taking advantage of Abyss Jewels, because Abyss Jewels have this mod that says enemies maimed by you take 5% increased damage over time. And in combination with Flesh and Stone, this is an absolutely massive damage multiplier for the build, which is why I'm actually coming out here and grabbing these reservation nodes. Flesh and Stone is just insane, so I connect it with Maim support to give that even more 10% increased physical damage. And then in combination with Flesh and Stone, and then 2 Abyss Jewels in a Darkness Enthroned and 1 in my boots, Flesh and Stone is currently on like giving me about 35 or 40% more damage, which is absolutely massive for actually scaling the damage of the skill, especially if you're familiar with Corrupting Fever, you'll know how hard it is to scale the damage of a physical damage over time skill. And on top of that, Corrupting Cry doesn't really have the benefit of scaling gem levels, which is why we're using a Shako, because it's a support gem, so you can't actually like scale the gem levels. I would go so far as to say that I don't think this build is even worth playing if you can't get a Shako of at least level 30 at the very least. I'd say if you can't afford a level 30 Corrupting Cry on a Shako, just don't play the build, because the amount of damage you're losing going from this to a 6-link setup in your body armor, you will probably be dealing about 1/3 of your damage, probably even less, because you'll actually have to give up 2 gem sockets elsewhere, whether that's out of losing your ability to self-proc adrenaline with Corrupting Fever, whether it's an aura or something else elsewhere. You'd be losing too much going from a Shako to a 6-link, so I just wouldn't recommend playing this build without a Shako. Now, on the defensive side of things, I am doing a few interesting things. So for ailments, I am using 1 prefix on my body armor and a suffix on my boots, along with an ancestral vision. So that basically takes care of all ailments that I would ever have to deal with. For my main physical damage reduction, I am running a ton of armor, an absolute metric load of armor. That's basically preventing all my physical damage. And then for my LE hit pool and my chaos hit pool, I'm running Divine Flesh, which I've also just realized my chaos res isn't actually capped, so I could probably get like 1% somewhere with catalyst maybe. But chaos res, super important, because it basically you take 50% of your elemental damage taken as chaos damage. This is super big as a defensive layer, especially because elemental damage taken as chaos can no longer penetrate. So if an enemy has, let's say, 10% fire pen, the fire damage that gets taken as chaos damage no longer penetrates fire resistance, because it isn't fire damage anymore. This is actually a very potent defensive layer against LE damage. And then of course we have Fortify, as per the fact that I am a champion. Finally, one last thing that I managed to fit in is a very large amount of suppress. Through reflexes, we get Mage Bane and basically just get suppress on every gear piece we can. That would be the body armor, the gloves, the boots, and the shield. Of course, you don't need perfect T1 rolls everywhere. As you can see, I have like tier 2 suppress here and tier 2 suppress on my boots, and I'm perfectly fine. However, you will need the higher tier suppress on all of your gear pieces for sure. Finally, in terms of like defensive auras, I'm just running Determination, and of course the last thing would be Vitality. Vitality basically makes it so that I can sustain my own Corrupting Cry. Even when I'm in combat, I can sustain it a little bit. Of course, when I'm also in combat, I also need in-combat recovery outside of just sustaining my Corrupting Cry. So we anoint Cannibalistic Rite. This has 2 purposes. A, it reduces the life cost of our general's cry, but B, it also gives me recover on kill, which is very powerful, especially when you just walk into a pack of enemies. You kind of explode them. No matter what HP you're at, you just fill up straight to max HP. And then second, we use a life flask with increased life recovery rate. This will basically save you in any situation where there's no enemies around and you're starting to get chunked. You can just pop your life flask, you'll head back up to full health. I do want to say thank you to anyone who's watched this video, and thank you to everyone who's supported my YouTube and Twitch over the course of the last few months. I really appreciate you guys making this something that I can actually do as a hobby, and I really enjoy making content and posting for you guys, and I'll try to keep you guys updated on what I do with PoE from here on out, at least in terms of what I manage to do with my free time. Otherwise, thank you guys for watching the video. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. Like and subscribe, you know the whole ordeal. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.